In this IOB podcast, advertising in your podcast, monetization warning, plus a podcast critique of the FilmJerk podcast. This is the IOB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and it's my goal to make your podcast the best. Thank you for listening to another IOB Podcast episode. My name is Mike. This is our 15th episode, and we've really got an important podcast for you. And we have a critique of the FilmJerk podcast. Despite its name, it's very high quality. But let's get to the main part of this podcast. Today, I want to touch on the touchy subject of advertising. Ads are great, but if you're going to have ads in your podcast, make sure they fit. Make sure they fit your podcast. Now, back in IOB Podcast 3, I had an interview with Jay Anxious, and one of the things we talked about was advertising. And what Jay said, I completely agree with. It's cool. Advertising is cool if they fit your podcast. So I'll give you an example here. A couple days ago, I was listening to a podcast about movies. And no, it was not the FilmJerk podcast. But the guy had his intro, welcome to the movie cast. And then right after his intro, he suddenly dropped the line, and you may have heard this line before. Today's podcast is being brought to you by blah, blah, blah. Ugh. Now, I'm sorry, but that line tends to be very cringe, and you really should do your best not to use it. You're going to have to be creative. However, that line was not the end of his cringe. This is a movie podcast, and he started pushing a line of cool casual clothing for the urban elite at outlet mall prices. And it wasn't even that cool. There was no echo or anything. So he has a movie podcast where he critiques movies. Very common. Great stuff. Good stuff. But his sponsor was a clothing company. Cool casual clothing for the urban elite, outlet mall prices. And there was just no connection. What does clothing have to do with the price of tea in China, right? I mean, movies and clothing. Now, see, this is the art. The way he did his podcast, there was nothing. There was no connection. But he needs to use his head. All is not lost. If you insist on having that ad in your podcast, at least make it work. Now, it's going to require a little thinking. But how about this? I wrote out an advertisement that probably would work for him. All right. So this is the idea. He is going to be, for example, critiquing the movie Die Hard. Right. And this is probably a bad example because in Die Hard, the main actor, of course, Bruce Willis, was he wearing nice clothing? The only thing I see in my mind right now is him with no shoes on, walking on glass. But anyway, for the sake of argument, let's say that Bruce Willis was actually wearing something nice, okay? I can't remember if he was. But anyway, so this is my ad. Now, the clothing company, I just created a name. The clothing company is Foxy Fashion, okay? So this is my ad that he should use. Here we go. So I was watching Die Hard yesterday for today's podcast, and I couldn't help but notice Bruce Willis in one scene was looking sharp. Do you remember the scene where he was blah, 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 blah? Coincidentally, I know a fashion company, Foxy Fashion, who makes clothing even sharper. And I talked to the owner, Fabrizio. He's actually my neighbor, and he agreed to sponsor today's show in exchange for a little plug, which I'm happy to do because Fabio's clothes, Foxy Fashion clothes, are perfect. If you want to look sharp, like Bruce Willis, even sharper, even foxier, you ought to be shopping at Foxy Fashion. So go check them out, foxyfashion.com. And thank you very much, Fabio, for sponsoring this show. Now, on to the movie Die Hard. Blah, 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 blah. So what I did was I took this fashion company and I added some exaggeration. I'm sure that Fabio Fabrizio is not really my neighbor, but maybe he is. Maybe he's your online neighbor. I don't know. It could be a neighbor of some sorts. But anyway, what's important is I took this Foxy Fashion clothing company and I was able to kind of weave it together with Bruce Willis and what he was wearing in the movie that I'm going to be talking about. You understand? So yeah, it's a very cheesy ad. However, it's much better than dropping a clothing bomb on a movie podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by Foxy Fashion. If you want to look good, if you want to look foxy, wear Foxy Fashion. Okay, I mean, that is just pure disconnect for your listener. But now we've kind of tied it together. At least it's not as annoying. It's cheesy. Yes, I understand it's cheesy, but it's not as annoying. Okay, so how about another angle? Well, this is another angle that I thought about. So right now, this is 2021. It's August. And COVID-19, that virus, has been causing just, great problems everywhere. For a long time, movie theaters were shut down, okay? So this is kind of related to that. So again, this is a movie podcast, but I'm going to tie in current events, COVID, along with this fashion company. So how am I going to do this? Well, this is my example. Because of COVID and the lockdowns, I don't even remember what it's like going to the movies anymore. I have to think. Popcorn. Yeah, the smell is so good. The Dolby sound. Oh, you can feel the music. And often, that special person next to you. Exciting. And that brings me to today's sponsor, Foxy Fashion. Trust me, trust us. Your date night wardrobe needs a date, rather an update. And Foxy Fashion is perfect. They have a brand new line of summer clothes, of fall clothes, of whatever clothes to make you the main feature on your next date at the movies. So go check them out, foxyfashion.com, and thanks a lot for sponsoring this podcast. There. So once again, I totally kind of made a story about Foxy Fashion and how it fits with our podcast. And don't be afraid to, say thank you. You don't have to say brought to you by. Just say thank you for sponsoring us. Thank you for helping us out, something like that. That's all you need to do. So using a sponsor for your podcast is often cringe for your listeners unless you can weave it into your podcast. Weaving is an art. It is. But weave, my friends, and if you need weaving help, heck, I'll offer you some free advice if you allow me to talk about it in a newsletter or a podcast. Don't worry, I won't get into specifics. Is that a deal? Yeah. Send your weavery problems to me, Mike, at introoutrobed.com, and I will do my best. All right? Now, introoutrobed.com, we not only offer this free advice to you, but also music, and it's possible to get a free custom track from TJ. TJ is our music producer. She composes, produces, does everything, whatever your genre is. TJ's got your back. If you're interested in getting some first-class, top-notch, exclusive, and you get the copyright music, then, of course, the email is contact@introoutrobed.com. And I'm happy to say, when we critique your podcast, format critique, not the content, format critique, you have a chance to get a free opening from TJ, and that is what's coming up next. It's podcast critique time. Submit your podcast, and we will critique it. I will critique it. The format. We're looking at the format, not the content. We're going to trust you on the content. But how you make that podcast, your opening and your sound quality, your closing, your transitions, your CTA call to action. These are really important things, and it's something that I'm happy to do for you. And if you submit your podcast and if we give you a critique, like I said, TJ will offer a free opening. That's pretty cool. And it's, once again, copyright free. You get the copyright. And it's totally exclusive. So we have a podcast to critique. It is the FilmJerk Podcast. FilmJerk, one word, FilmJerk. FilmJerk. Now, that name just sounds not that nice. So I had to do some research, and I discovered FilmJerk doesn't mean that the guy talking about movies is a jerk. It's actually a reference to Soda Jerk, a person who worked at a fountain shop a long, long time ago. Think Back to the Future 1 when he went back to the future and was at the fountain shop, right? That's where everybody hung out. So that's actually the guy who works there. That's a soda jerk, and this guy's a film jerk, but he sounds like a really nice guy. His name is Edward Havens, and he's got a great podcast. Of course, the content, we don't need to be too concerned about that, but it's great. This is a high quality podcast, and he's already up to the 60s, which means he's been doing this a while. Actually, the FilmJerk.com is over 20 years old, and it's quite renowned. But podcasting, he's only on episode 61, so he's kind of new to this area. And how is he doing? I like it. It's great. Actually, I really like your opening. Your opening, everybody, his opening is a film reel. This kind of sound, and it sounds fantastic. It's really great. I would, if I can give you a piece of advice now, Edward, I would put your voice and the a little bit closer. If not, it would be even better to kind of fade out the film reel and then have your voice start over the top of it. That requires multi-track editing. It's not that complicated, but I really think it would help. I think it would sound even better, but that's totally up to you. What you have right now really does sound good. Let's get into some specifics. In episode 61, I could hear some mic sounds, like you bumping the mic or bumping your desk. And that's something that we always want to try and avoid. And I'm guessing, and I don't know, but I'm guessing at 6:45, at 7:05, was that like 8:15, I could hear some bumps. I'm guessing the microphone you're using is very, very sensitive, okay? So you got to be careful. Now, I don't know if your microphone is on a boom or if it's resting on your desk. If it's on a boom with a spring, even though you bump, like right now I'm bumping my desk, but you probably, hopefully can't hear anything, okay? The microphone is isolated in space because it's sitting on a spring on a microphone stand. So that's one thing you can do to fix it. Also, I'm guessing that the microphone you're using, the voice quality is very good, but I'm guessing that it might be, I don't know. Is it a dynamic mic? Is it a condenser mic? Is it a USB mic? So I'm using a dynamic mic. And the nice thing about a dynamic mic is it doesn't pick up any background noise. Very, very little background noise. Basically, when you use a dynamic mic, you want your lips to the mic. Now, a condenser mic is great especially if you're a musician. So you want to play the guitar or play the piano. You need to pick up high quality. You need to have a really high quality mic, but you need to pick up that music. So in that situation, a condenser mic is actually much better. Now, you can use a condenser mic for your voice too, but typically if you're in an office with bare walls or a lot of glass, there's going to be echo. Maybe the cat is going to meow in the background, or the dog outside is going to bark, or you're going to, even your cell phone vibrating on the desk, you can pick that stuff up with one of those microphones, a condenser microphone. So a dynamic mic really helps in that situation. USB mics, yeah, they're going to pick up everything too. So I'm guessing, Edward, that your microphone might be a condenser mic. I'm guessing that because the quality is really good, but it is picking up some sound. So that's something you might want to consider upgrading in the future. Me, I use a Heil PR40 microphone, and I absolutely love it. It's really great. So there's that. Episode 56, there was a really long pause after your opening, so be careful of that. Again, everybody, depending on how you're editing your podcast, you can see these long pauses, and they're really easy to fix, okay? So I do encourage people to use an actual editing software, whether it's Audition or Sony Vegas, which I use, or whatever it is. I do recommend that you use something like that. Visually, you can see where to edit. Even if you don't like to edit your podcast, you still want to take out the long pauses, okay? So check that. And you had a different speaker. You had a guest, Sarah. And I noticed that Sarah was on my left microphone and you were on the right microphone. So you were coming in on different speakers. I guess that's okay. But again, it's actually not the best. So I would try to have you both come in on both speakers. So that's something you want to watch. And I think Sarah's mic level was a little bit low. You always want to do your best to keep the mic levels, the volume, the same, so that Sarah's voice is just as powerful as yours. And that can really sometimes be tricky because sometimes people talk like this and then they talk like this, and it can be hard to control. CTA, call to action. And I tell everybody, even though you don't want to, people tend to not want to, you really should have a CTA in the beginning and at the end. And you can make it short. You can make it simple. It can be as simple as FilmJerk.com. This is Edward, blah, blah, blah. You can give your email address. You can give your YouTube channel, Facebook page, whatever it is in the beginning. I highly recommend that you let everybody know that you have a means to be contacted. Okay? So in your case, I think, FilmJerk.com is perfect. Okay? You can email, whatever. Now, your opening, like I said, is excellent. I really, really like it. You don't give your name, Edward, and I'm curious as to why you don't do that. People like to know you. We want to know your name, and I went to the website and I found your name. So give us your name. And like I said, give us your website too. Your closing. Now, sometimes you had a really good call to action. I like that. Make it consistent. Have somewhat of a consistent closing. Since you do movies, I really recommend, it's totally up to you, of course, but giving out your email so that people can contact you and give opinions and give suggestions and things like that. Not that you need that, Edward, but I think it's always a good thing to do. People want to know that they can contact you, and they usually don't, okay? 3%. If you give your email address to 100 people, maybe 3 people, maximum 5 people are going to email you. So it's not really a big burden, but it's common courtesy. And for business purposes, not that you have any business purposes, it's really beneficial so that your listeners can reach out to you and get in touch with you. Now, in your closing, you are using music that's copyrighted. So King Crimson, Elephant Talk, that's dangerous stuff. Flying from E.T., dangerous stuff. So you really, and I understand, you want to kind of keep a theme sometimes, like with the E.T. music, but it's going to get flagged. And I was talking with Libsyn in a couple of podcasts ago, and we talked about how you right now you're not having a problem using King Crimson music in your podcast, but eventually you may. And what could happen is that content gets deleted. Okay, so for example, if it's on iTunes and then iTunes decides to, stop this abuse of copyright infringement, they'll just delete the podcast. Okay, and that's like, oh no, that's a lot of work, and search, SEO, everything, it's just gone. So I highly recommend that you change that you don't do that. And I kind of have my own idea. So your opening was the, well, why not have the closing be the, do you know what I think you know what I mean, but that would be perfect. Or again, you could have some music. You could have music also as your closing. So, yeah. In podcast 61, you had a very nice call to action, but yeah. And I remember that you were talking with Sarah, and you mentioned that Sarah said that you were kind of talking over her, and that was a bit of a problem. So here's something that I highly, highly, highly recommend. When I do interviews, I use the software called Squadcast, and we have an affiliate link, so I'll just be honest right there. Squadcast is absolutely, there's no question, the best software out there for interviews. Okay, so I don't do that many interviews, but anyway, I have a monthly subscription to Squadcast, and when I use it, it's great. The reason it's great is because when it records locally. And this is kind of weird, but that's what happens. So here I am at my house recording with my computer. Squadcast is going to record here. And then, Sarah is at her house with her computer. Squadcast is going to record her there. And then Squadcast is going to suck up those recordings, and they do it in real time, by the way, so you never lose anything. And then they're going to make it available to you to download. So you actually have two audio files. One of them has just you, and the other one has just Sarah. And then it's really easy, again, in your editing software, if you have a decent, they're not expensive editing software, put those together, and it's super easy to time up. And then you can see when you guys are talking over each other. And you can edit that stuff out very, very easily. And it sounds very clean. And I do this all the time. Sometimes I'll be interviewing someone and they'll say something interesting and I'll go, And actually that's distracting. Not to the speaker, but sometimes to the listener, it's very distracting. So what I can do is I can lower that volume level, or I can just cut it out and have it sound really clean. And usually that's what I do. I tend to take out my stuff, my So it's really, without a doubt, the best software out there for interviews. So that is something that I definitely would recommend to you. Other than that, the quality, the way you put it together, your flow, your audio levels are just fantastic. Yeah, you got a great voice. It's a podcast of great depth. So yeah, you're obviously professional. So that is my critique, Edward. I hope that what I've told you is beneficial and helpful to you. And like I said, TJ is standing by if you need anything, a music opening track. However, I told TJ, man, I don't know. I think what Edward is using right now is absolutely wonderful. I will say, by the way, to everybody, sound effects like what Edward is using, those can be copyrighted too. So I'm not sure where you got that, but do be careful. A lot of times, for example, on YouTube, they'll upload, music. This is a sound effect, copyright free. That tends not to be the case unless that person actually made the sound. Okay, so if the person actually made the sound effect and then they said it's free, then it's free, but you still could have weird problems. Always double check. Be careful. The last thing you want to do is create a fantastic podcast like the FilmJerk podcast, and then one day down the road have an event where they say, oh, no, this sound right here, this sound is a copyright infringement. Boom, they take it down. This has happened to me on YouTube. You guys know the Beatles song, When I'm 64. I used like one line. I can't remember which line, but one line of the song, and I even faded it out, is more of a background, but one line from the song, and that video alone was deleted. Actually, there were two videos because a response to that. Anyway, it's gone. And now my sequence is out. So, if you watch my videos on YouTube, it's like video 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83 are gone. And then 84, 85, and people are always asking, where are the other videos, man? And I'm saying, yeah, YouTube took it away. So YouTube is definitely on it. Gotta be careful. Gotta be careful. All right, that's it. I hope that this was beneficial. There you have it. TheFilmJerk.com. Actually, it's not The FilmJerk. It's FilmJerk.com. That's his website. That's Edward's website. So if you like movies, and he does a lot of background stuff, really, really great stuff. So check out his podcast and check out TJ. Yeah, introoutrobed.com. TJ's site. That's where TJ creates music specifically designed for online people like you. So podcast intros, outros, background music, bed music, transitions, anything that you need for your podcasts or YouTube videos, TJ can do it. Just give her some examples of what you want, and TJ will create it for you. Introoutrobed.com. You can email TJ, contact@introoutrobed.com. You can email me and say, hey, man, you're so cool. Thanks. Mike at introoutrobed.com. We've got lots of stuff for you and lots of stuff coming up, too. Don't forget, if wherever you find us, whether it was iTunes or Stitcher, wherever, please, if you can, leave a rating, thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever it is. The more, the better. We're happy with that stuff. Leaving comments is really effective. We would love to hear that. And you can email us your comment, too, because, I'll tell you, this is a problem. You can leave a comment on iTunes, and you can leave a comment someplace else, and how do you know where to go, right? You don't know, like, did somebody leave a comment? Checking iTunes is easy, but there's so many other places. So you're always welcome to copy that and email it to us, and we'll mention you. We'll mention you on the air if you want. On the air. See, I'm a radio DJ, so I say on the air. We'll mention you in the podcast if you would like your name mentioned. We'll be happy to give shout-outs to podcasts. We're here to help you make your podcast the best. And what can we do but, promote and help and do everything else? Have an outstanding week, guys. Make excellent podcasts, and I'll talk to you next time.